Before going for the webinars, actually, I was trying meticulously not to talk on this pandemic. If you all look through my Vision editorial, I literally tried to avoid a pandemic. But the situation has made me to go for this. Our fellow doctors, Dr. Padwal, Dr. Jadkar, they are no more now. Although the whole doctors are affected by this, but the KMA fraternity or fellow doctors are also affected by this. So be careful for this. Although the present situation tells you that the pandemic is coming down, no, it's not. Be careful. Why? On one ground, this pandemic is looking downfall in India, but the Spain has shut down. France is on the way. Today, Britain has declared its shutdown. So, whether we are going to do for second shutdown, the shutdown is not important. The health of these our fellow doctors are very important. Be careful. For second thing, the vaccines. The vaccines are going to be available for whom they say that it is for COVID warriors, but I doubt it. The politicians, higher corporates, and the black marketeers will be the first preferentials. So take care of yourself. Second thing, the vaccine is still under trial. You cannot talk the outcome of this. And the last thing, the financial burden. The government has taken care of their doctors. So fellow my doctors, please take care of yourself. Your family is dependent on you. Keep your distancing, keep sanitization, keep mask and all those things. Prevent yourself from this thing. So it's okay. So coming to the present day webinar, we have got our modest and humble Dr. Roy Sunil Patwankar. We have taken us a little bit different topic from our GI system, the gallbladder. So Dr. Amola Parikh will introduce you Dr. Roy Sunil Patwankar. So yeah, Dr. Amola.
Thank you, Dr. Padre, and good morning, everyone. After the last KMA webinar on liver by Dr. Abha Agarwal, we bring to you today gallbladder diseases by none other than the highly renowned and respected laparoscopic surgeon, Dr. Roy Patwankar, who is the director of Zen Multi-Speciality Hospital in Chembur. Roy has presented more than 80 scientific papers and has more than 30 publications, national and international, to his credit. He is a great teacher and loves to train upcoming surgeons through live workshops. He was awarded the Best Laparoscopic Surgeon Award by Zee 24 Stars in December 2019. Besides his academic achievements, he also has social commitment achievements to his credit. He stayed with Dr. Prakash Amte. He not only trained Dr. Digant Amte, but also donated a video endoscope to Dr. Amte's. He was awarded the Sushruta Award by the Mumbai Medical Foundation for medical teaching and social commitments. His achievements are so many that as a classmate, as soon as I type Roy, my mobile auto-corrects to congrats, Roy. So proud to be your batchmate. I also welcome our own KMA members for an interactive session. Dr. Vinod Biradar, Dr. Vikrant Pawar, Dr. Tushar Doshi, and Dr. Monica Mahajan. So over to you, Dr. Roy.
Thank you, Amola, Dr. Pade, and Dr. Parikh. Thank you for the kind invite to KMA. I think I have been to KMA many times. I know the very high quality of your annual meetings that you do every year. And thank you, Amola, for speaking some lies about me and telling me how nice a person I am. We'll get on. I thought we'd have, rather than having a lecture, which I'm sure all of you are very bored about, having been through so many webinars, I thought we'll have a panel discussion so that we can actually bring out the nuances of gallbladder disease a little bit better. And I'm going to rely on the wisdom of my four panelists to give you vision. Amola, is my audio and video clear to you?
Yes. Absolutely.
Let me start by giving you a famous aphorism I tell all my minimal access fellows when they leave our hospital to start practice. I tell them that to be a successful doctor in Kandivali or anywhere else, you need three things. You need gray hair, you need a big paunch, and you need very large piles. I go on to tell them that if you have gray hair or no hair, like in some of you, people think you're a wise man and they trust your judgment. If you have a very large paunch like me, they think you're a prosperous man and you want to fleece them. And if you have very large piles, you have a permanent look of pain on your face and the patient feels you're concerned for him. So we are in the next 45 minutes, or as long as Amola allows me, discuss a few cases of gallbladder disease. The first patient is a patient who comes to you, and I'm going to start this by asking Dr. Vikrant Pawar this question. Vikrant sir, this patient comes to you in your clinic and he goes for a pre-employment checkup, and the pre-employment routine checkup shows 2 gallbladder polyps of 6 and 9 millimeters. He has no history of right upper quadrant pain. He has mild dyspepsia. He says, when I go to parties, when I eat out, I eat a lot of non-veg food, I get gas and bloating. And he tells you, doctor, you tell me how to best manage myself. How would you answer, Dr. Pawar?
I think first is he has to have regular food timings, regular meal timings, about spicy and oily food. As regarding the gallbladder polyps on the sonography, they just need observation over a period of time. The 6 millimeter polyp and the 9 millimeter polyp, repeating sonography after a period of 6 months, and keep the patient on a watch every 6 months by doing repeat sonography. If the polyps increase in size, then they may need some further investigations.
Excellent points. I think keep the polyps under observation and repeat sonography. So I'm going to ask this to Dr. Vinod Birazdar. Dr. Birazdar, you are flooded with a number of tests, and patients are now on Google. They are all Google masters, and they read of all these tests. They have PET scans, HIDA scans, MRIs, CTs. So what would you tell them? Should you want to investigate this patient, Dr. Vinod?
Cholangitis is not observed well on sonography. Hello?
Yes, a little louder, please.
Cholangitis, if we suspect cholangitis also, because patient is getting pain now and then. So the same patient we are talking about.
Yes,
no, who is having
correct.
So this patient need to be investigated further. And in this case, I think MRCP will be a...
Yeah, you can just give your opinion. Don't worry. This is just going to be a discussion among friends. So there is no right or wrong about it. We'll try and look at all these tests. What is good, what is bad, cost effectiveness, risks. So don't worry about answering that. So you feel MRCP is the best test. Okay.
Maybe CT, we can go for CT also.
All right.
CT also we can go.
If you look at all these tests that I enumerated, first is the X-ray abdomen is a useless test for this. Ultrasound remains an excellent investigation. The CT is good for a situation when you suspect a gallbladder cancer. A CT does not pick up gallstones. Remember that. So sometimes the ultrasonologist will get confused between a gallstone and a gallbladder polyp. And how do they differentiate between the two? They're both seen as shadows. So when they see a shadow attached to the wall, they make the patient change position from supine to left lateral to right lateral and see if the shadow is moving. If the shadow is moving, they confirm that it's a stone. If it's stuck to the wall, then they call it a gallbladder polyp. So sometimes differentiating between a polyp and a stone may be a little difficult. You also have a condition called cholestrosis, where you have these enlargements of the wall which are seen as gallbladder polyps. As Dr. Vinod said, MRCP, which is an MRI of the gallbladder and bile duct, remains an excellent test to look at the intra and extrahepatic biliary system. The HIDA scan is only done to look at gallbladder function. We actually inject a radionuclide isotope, technetium-99 based isotope, intravenously, which is picked up selectively by the liver into the gallbladder. Then we give the patient a fatty meal, typically cheese or butter along with contract. 60% injection is there. We say the gallbladder function is normal. The PET scans don't have any role in this situation. So the dilemma really is, should we operate on these patients or leave them alone? So as it happens, this patient insisted on surgery and the biopsy showed adenocarcinoma. So this is extremely important. So which polyps are the ones that you must advise surgery? So a polyp that is more than 10 millimeters in size, we know that a centimeter size polyp, 10% of them will be gallbladder cancer. Now, gallbladder cancers are typically silent cancers. They don't produce symptoms till there is a gallbladder invasion or a large growth invading at the porta. The second criteria is those which are increasing in size, or those which are becoming, the number is increasing, or if you have very high quality CT which shows muscular penetration on imaging. These are the indications of surgery. Remember, gallbladder polyps in Southeast Asia, like Korea, China, are much more aggressive than polyps that are seen in the Western world. So keep that in mind when you advise surgery. This is a picture of endoscopic ultrasound which we can do, which you can actually look at gallbladder penetration. But realistically, the endoscopic ultrasound is an expensive test, needs a sedation. So do it on a long-term basis is not possible. You can, as Dr. Vikrant Pawar said, do regular ultrasounds every 6 months. But suppose you're a 25-year-old man, to tell him to do lifelong ultrasounds is a matter of conjecture whether we can do it. If you look at gallbladder cancers in general, about 75 to 90% of gallbladder cancers are seen in presence of stones, particularly when the stone bulk is more than 3 centimeters in size, and generally associated with very poor prognosis because they present either locally. This is a gallbladder cancer that we did a liver resection on, and this is the treatment where we resected the gallbladder along with the nodes, but the 5-year survivals are very low. So should we do a prophylactic gallbladder surgery? Definitely not. There is no room to do a preventive gallbladder surgery, and there are some criteria to decide when we will do these surgeries. You can probably do them if you have a family history of gallbladder cancer, or you belong to the Gangetic belt, because we know gallbladder cancer is very high in UP, Bihar, Assam, people who live there, not genetically from there. Or as I told you, more than 10 millimeter polyp, multiple polyps, or increasing in size are some of the indications of doing laparoscopic cholecystectomy for GB polyps. The second case I'm going to ask Dr. Monica Mahajan.
So
ma'am, this is a 45-year-old lady who comes to your dispensary with right upper quadrant pain, radiating to the back and vomiting for a day. Similar episodes a couple of times in the past. You ask her to get an ultrasound done, which shows a thickened gallbladder wall with a positive Murphy's sign. CBD is normal size. She has raised WBC count of 15,600, predominantly neutrophils. A bilirubin is borderline raised, SGOT, SGPT, alk-phos are raised. What is going through your mind and how will you treat this lady, Dr. Monica Mahajan? Dr. Mahajan, are you with us?
Yeah, the unmute
Yes,
is
ma'am.
not happening.
So how would you treat this lady?
Unmute. Okay.
We can hear you, ma'am.
Yeah. So first we'll take the history of the patient, what we have gone through right now. Okay. And then we will ask about this sonography of the patient.
So sonography is showing a thickened wall with multiple gallstones, and her LFT
is positive. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, Murphy's is positive. LFTs is slightly abnormal. WBC is high. How would you take this further?
I think
maybe you can ask Dr. Tushar Doshi this question. Dr. Tushar, would you add something beyond what Dr. Monica said? Dr. Tushar Doshi, are you
we have
with us?
to confirm the diagnosis.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, I
Hello?
can hear you. Please go on.
Yeah.
Please carry on, Dr. Doshi. So let me...
Dr. Tushar is not audible. I'm Dr.
Okay.
Birazna.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Dr. Birazna. Go ahead.
Vinod, am I audible now?
So we
Yeah,
have
you're
to
audible.
establish diagnosis of colodocolithiasis
Yeah,
because the enzymes, hello,
correct.
Is it-
Go on, please.
bilirubin is raised, alkaline phosphatase is raised, So we need to get even serum lipase done, whether pancreas is also involved or not.
Excellent.
And we need to investigate for choledocholithiasis. So
Right.
again, here MRCP is a investigation of choice. And if we establish the diagnosis of choledocholithiasis or CBD blockage, then we need to think of this stenting or this type
Yeah,
of
we'll come to that.
intervention.
So if you look at the history
Sir, before
carefully,
that, can I add, sir, before that? Yes,
Yes, sir.
From the history and which has been shown on the screen, this patient looks to be in a toxic and an infective state. So ideally, all such patients should be advised hospitalization, and they should be
Absolutely.
started on some good amount of antibiotics, which would cover both gram-positive and gram-negative organisms.
Right.
Simultaneously, he should be investigated further as per the lines of what Dr. Vinod Birajdar is thinking. And at the end of 2-3 days of the course of the antibiotics given and the further investigation shown, the further line of strategy should be thought of.
Excellent. So, like many patients, no, this lady says, मेरे बेटे का कल 10th standard का exam है, मैं परसों admit हो जाऊंगी. Please give me some antibiotics in the moment. So, what antibiotic would you use, Dr. Doshi? You mentioned good antibiotic to cover gram-negative, gram-positive, but practically आप क्या देंगे आपके dispensary में?
Amoxicillin with clavulanic acid, 625 milligram.
Absolutely. Amoxiclav, yes, that's a good combination. It covers both gram-positive and gram. Anything else?
And metronidazole.
Yeah. Okay. So let's come a little bit closely at this history. The first thing is the history is very typically of cholecystitis. The ultrasound not only shows gallstones, but it shows thickened gallbladder wall. Now, thickened gallbladder wall is a marker of acute on chronic cholecystitis. So that part of diagnosis is well established. The second thing I'm telling you is she has pericholecystic fluid. What happens in the ultrasound, you see a rim of edema of fluid around the gallbladder. This confirms to you that this is a acute severe cholecystitis. The CBD is 6 millimeters. So the normal size of CBD is 6 millimeters. In an elderly person, the normal size is 7 millimeters. That is called senile dilatation of CBD. So if I tell you the CBD is 9 millimeters, immediately your antenna must go up saying that this is a dilated CBD. And there may be something wrong here. What else have I told you? I've told you WBC count is 15,600. As Tushar Bhai has said, this is acute infection. Now, as far as choice of antibiotics, remember the majority of gallbladder and biliary infections are gram-negative. So always choose an antibiotic which covers gram-positive and gram-negative, but typically covers gram-negative bacteria. Usually they are rarely ever anaerobic bacteria. So usually metronidazole I would not personally use in my practice. But as Tushar Bhai said, co-amoxiclav, cefuroxime, these are excellent antibiotics. Or even you can use quinolones like levofloxacin. Generally, I don't like to use quinolones above the age of 60 because they have a higher chance of getting neuropsychiatric or convulsions after the age of 60, rarely. So co-amoxiclav, as Tushar Bhai said, is excellent antibiotic. Now, the LFTs show borderline raised bilirubin, SGOT, SGPT 215, and alpha 600. I'm going to ask Dr. Vikrant Pawar. Dr. Pawar, is this possible that this patient is getting hepatitis? Pawar, sir? You are muted, Pawar, sir. You unmute yourself.
There's possibility that there could be some edema of the common bile duct, or some of the stones might have traveled into the bile duct and causing a little bit of obstructive symptoms also, along with the infection of the gallbladder. And that could account for the raised liver enzymes and alkaline phosphatase levels.
Excellent point Dr. Pawar has mentioned. Remember this picture of transaminases, that is SGOT, SGPT between 50 and 250 with alkaline phosphatase, which is double the normal, is a textbook picture of obstructive jaundice. In a hepatitis, your transaminases would go up above 500. Your alkaline phosphatase goes up, but maybe 10 or 20% above normal. It never doubles like in this situation. But remember, even in normal hepatitis, there may be a cholestatic phase when the patients complain of itching of the body, clay-colored stool, and the ultrasound will show gallbladder edema, which we call pseudo-wall thickening. So this is there just to confuse us. So in an early stage of hepatitis, you see thickening of gallbladder wall, a pseudo-wall thickening, and you may have a brief cholestatic phase. But this picture that, as Dr. Pawar mentioned, is very typically this. So this patient refused admission, and Dr. Birazdar and Dr. Doshi have mentioned they put on coamoxiclav. We are in fact suggesting CBD stones. As Dr. Birazdar mentioned, the investigation of choice is always MRCP and never a CT scan. You will do a CT scan only twice. One, when you feel that there may be a gallbladder perforation with peritonitis, or there is a gallbladder cancer, then you will do a CT as opposed to a MRCP. This is very, very important. If the patient has in fact CBD stones, early ERCP is to be done. Even if the patient has cholangitis, as in fever with chills, etc., do an early ERCP after giving good gram-negative cover. Surgically, we call this source control. Take care of the cause of sepsis. And remember, sepsis is not an antibiotic deficiency syndrome. Just hitting a patient with higher antibiotics, meropenem, amikacin, is not enough. Take care of the underlying cause of sepsis. Without that, nothing will actually happen. So I'm not going to run any of these videos as I told you earlier. These are, we will just try and do as much, just to give you a little history. The first gallbladder, you may not know, was done in a live dog using a rigid stainless steel cystoscope in the year 1902 by George Kelling. In fact, much to my disgust, the first appendicectomy done successfully laparoscopically was a gynecologist. You know, all surgeons tend to give GAN to gynecologists, but ironically, this was a German gynecologist who did the first documented lap appendicectomy in the world. In 1910, the first 115 procedures were documented in human beings by Hans Jacobius, an Austrian surgeon. But this man was disbarred from medical practice for doing unethical work, and nothing happened for almost 50 years till Eric Muhe did the first lap chole. This is so much about. I'm now going to come to Dr. Vinod Birazdar. Dr. Birazdar, what is acalculous cholecystitis? When you're seeing right upper quadrant pain, but a sonography showing swelling of gallbladder but no gallstones, how would you approach this situation? Dr. Birazdar, please.
This could be due to
a little louder, sir.
This scenario would be because of the infection of the gallbladder, because of the infection traveling through the adjacent intestines. Then it can cause infection to the gallbladder, or it is just a cholangitis but not a cholecystitis, which irritates the gallbladder, and that is why patient gets pain.
So let's examine what Dr. Birazdar has said. He says this may be cholangitis. So I want you to understand what cholangitis means. Cholangitis means infection of the bile duct and the biliary system because of infection in the bile. So this is not associated with cholecystitis. Cholecystitis means infection in the gallbladder. Cholangitis means there's a biliary infection of the intra and extrahepatic biliary tree, and it differentiates from cholecystitis because in cholangitis it's almost always gram negative. It may be associated with tachycardia, tachypnea, and hypotension, which is a sign of septicemia. So cholecystitis, acute acalculous cholecystitis, does not give cholangitis. These are two separate conditions. Similarly, we use a lot of loose terms: toxemia, septicemia. I want you to, in your mind, be clear about what this is. When you say the word toxemia, it just simply means toxins in the blood. When you say septicemia, it means bacteremia and toxemia, usually indicating a gram-negative sepsis. Okay. So coming on to acute calculous cholecystitis, when patient has right upper quadrant pain, but ultrasound shows gallbladder infection, but no stones. As I said, one of the common causes of this is dengue fever. In dengue, very common to get acute acalculous cholecystitis. The second is salmonella infections, typhoid. The third is spinal injuries, when a patient has severe spinal shock syndrome. The fourth is patients who are on total parenteral nutrition. And then some drugs. Some drugs, and a common drug that we use in practice is ceftriaxone. Monosef, as you commonly know it. So ceftriaxone as an antibiotic itself causes gallbladder sludging, and it can cause mild medical cholestasis. So generally in your patients of cholecystitis, cholangitis, do not use ceftriaxone. You may get something called antibiotic induced sludge. So apart from giving appropriate antibiotics, remember you must also treat the underlying cause. In dengue, in malaria you get, or in hepatitis, you get what is called pseudo thickening of gallbladder. The ultrasonologist will say thickened gallbladder wall, edema around the gallbladder wall, but no gallbladder stones. That should immediately put your antennae up. Is there any other underlying disease that we are missing? Sure, the presentation is like cholecystitis, but if there are no stones, why cholecystitis? Is it dengue? Is it malaria? Is there history of high-grade fever with chills? Is there history of travel? Is there a spinal problem? Is he on any other drugs which can cause this? And the treatment is 99% always appropriate antibiotics and conservative treatment. Very rarely these need anything else to do.
I would like to interrupt.
So in life, Albert Einstein said, the important thing is never to stop questioning yourself and the people around you. We are now going to come to a patient of jaundice, and this I am going to direct to Dr. Monica Mahajan. So just to give you an overview of this is the intra and extrahepatic biliary tree. So Dr. Monica, this is a middle-aged man, comes to you in your dispensary with right upper quadrant and epigastric pain which is dull. It is intermittent and not radiating to back and associated with few episodes of vomiting. He has history of yellowish discoloration of sclera and urine for 3 days. Never has had alcohol. And just to be doubly sure, you ask his wife, because that's a reliable historian. Even the wife for a change says that he doesn't have alcohol. No addictions, no family history, and no recent drug history. He does tell you that he went to a neighboring hospital, had to be given painkillers for right upper quadrant pain 8 months ago. Dr. Monica, what are you thinking of at this time? And when a patient of early jaundice and right upper quadrant pain, what is going through your mind? And what tests will you ask for?
We'll go for the basic test like CBC, LFT.
Absolutely.
And sonography of the abdomen.
Excellent. So this is very well put. Let's actually go to this history a little bit carefully. Mm-hmm. So 3-day history, no alcohol intake, no addictions. I've mentioned to you no recent drugs, and very, very important to explore the history of alternative medicine. Currently, I see a lot of patients coming to me in the pandemic with epigastric pain, bloating, non-ulcer dyspepsia, and a lot of these patients have a history of taking herbal medicines or various kadas, the immunity boosting kadas, which are actually causing dyspeptic symptoms. Similarly, a lot of Ayurvedic drugs, a lot of Unani drugs given for treatment of diabetes contain heavy metals and may cause liver disease. So please keep that in mind. As Dr. Monica mentioned, it's important, the first screening investigation apart from CBC, LFT should be an ultrasound abdomen and nothing else. You are carefully going to explore for history of anorexia, weight loss, and change in color of stool. So I would ask for this additional history to this patient.
Yeah, clay colored stools sometimes.
Come again?
Clay colored stools.
Absolutely. So steatorrhea or clay colored stool indicates cholestasis. And remember, obstructive jaundice can be surgical because of a mechanical block, or it can be medical because of intrahepatic cholestasis because of drugs. And one common drug that we just discussed was augmentin or co-amoxiclav. So if a patient is on co-amoxiclav for a URTI or infection and he has abnormal LFTs, one of the things to remember is co-amoxiclav itself causes medical jaundice. Estrogens, anabolic steroids, some antihypertensives, all of these can cause. If a patient also has anorexia and weight loss, that should also make. So this is a broad thing that I put up. And I firmly believe that before you send a patient for ultrasound, just by looking at a patient's LFTs, in your mind, 70% of times you must have a working diagnosis. And I like to actually put down my working diagnosis on my prescription before I get the ultrasound report. So generally, if your patient of jaundice has prodromal symptoms, it is likely like body ache, nausea, flu-like feeling, likely he may be developing a form of hepatitis. If there are no prodromal symptoms and he has fever, pain and itching, likely this is obstructive jaundice. And remember, as I said, majority are surgical with stone, cancer, polyp, etc. But you also look at medical cholestatic jaundice, or also think of hemolysis, particularly in a situation of there are a lot of malaria and dengue in your area. If your patient has fever, vomiting and has bile salts and bile pigments in urine, I divide them in two groups. A normal or low WBC count with a high SGBT bilirubin, likely this is viral hepatitis, fever, malaria, enteric or enteric hepatitis. If on the other hand, there is a raised WBC count, I think in terms of cholangitis, hepatitis, liver abscesses, leptospirosis. So this is how to, in your mind, make a working diagnosis before the ultrasound. Now, these are some of the things that we have been discussing all earlier. Remember, the AST, ALT or SGOT, SGPT as we more commonly call it, are markers of hepatocellular function. They indicate hepatitis. So in an obstructive jaundice, the SGOT, SGPT will never go beyond 300 at the most. If your SGOT, SGPT is 1000, you are safe to say that this cannot be obstructive jaundice. This is something related to function of the hepatocyte, or it's a hepatitis of some kind. On the other hand, alkaline phosphatase is released by the cuboidal cells lining the common bile duct and the intrahepatic biliary radicals. So if your alkaline phosphatase is more than double the normal, it is always some form of obstructive jaundice, medical or surgical. Bilirubin. The second clue is if your bilirubin in a patient of obstructive jaundice is more than 35, 99% it is likely to be a malignancy. CBD stones, strictures, worms in the bile duct will never raise your bilirubin more than 30. And more than 35 in a patient of obstructive jaundice is likely to be because of malignancy. What about a hemogram? If your hemoglobin is low, think of hemolysis, think of hemolytic anemia, think of malaria, think of dengue, think of a long-standing malignancy. If your WBC count is raised, think in terms of an infective cause like we discussed. So prodromal symptoms with raised WBC count, first diagnosis will be cholangitis, cholecystitis, amoebic liver abscess, leptospirosis. These are two tumor markers we use. So you strongly suspect malignancy, you do a CA19-9 and a CEA. A CA19-9 tends to go up in patients with hepatobiliary malignancy. But you may have a malignancy with a normal CA19-9. Keep that in mind. I'll keep this short. What are the things that we look for in the ultrasound and what a good sonologist will tell you? Number one, the size and echo of the liver. Number two, the pancreas, but not always easy to see the pancreas. The gallbladder is better seen with ultrasound than with a CT scan. Let me be very clear. If you have a choice between an ultrasound and a CT scan to see gallbladder, ask for ultrasound. Many times, radiolucent gallstones are not seen on CT scan. So patient comes to me with two reports. Doctor, USG is showing gallstones and a CT scan is showing no gallstones. Obviously, they will tell me CT scan is right, but it isn't. The radiolucent gallstones will not be seen on CT. So I asked them to do an MRCP and always the stones are better seen on that. The size of the bile duct and intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation. If your size is more than 8 millimeters, it's always significant. Remember this. So I won't go into too many of these details, but this is very, very important. You know, in KM, when we didn't know the answer to a question, say somebody asked me the cause of obstructive jaundice in 3rd MBBS and I was not well prepared. I used to spend more time on the back benches playing volleyball outside. Then we would remember inside the lumen, inside the wall and outside the wall. So inside the lumen is gallbladder or pregnancies. In the wall means stricture, which can be inflammation, post-traumatic, post-operative, sclerosing cholangitis or cholangiocarcinoma, or really parasites. So all this must be going through your mind. So after, if you suspect obstructive jaundice, after USG abdomen, you will do an MRCP and don't do anything else at this point in time. So this is what is called the Charcot's triad. I think Dr. Birazdar mentioned cholangitis. So if your patient of jaundice also has fever with chills and abdominal pain, he has what is called the Charcot's triad. It is an indication that he has a gram-negative sepsis. He must be in hospital. If the patient refuses admission, write on paper. Refusing admission, take a signature, and then prescribing a good antibiotic. Remember this very, very important point. We'll keep this short. We'll not go into many of these details. These are various things, the various imagings we've discussed. I hope this was useful. The next case I'm going to give
Can you put some?
Yes, sir.
Can you put some light on HIDA test cholecystography?
Yes, very good. So the HIDA scan, Dr. Birazdar, is a technetium-linked radioisotope scan where you give the tagging isotope, which is selectively picked up by the liver and excreted into the gallbladder. So the patient is called nil by mouth. We give the injection of the radioisotope in any nuclear medicine center. The isotope is selectively concentrated in the gallbladder. So you will see a hot area of the gallbladder. Then we give in the scan center, give them a fatty meal. So typically bread, butter and cheese. So when fat enters the duodenum is lined by what are called the eye cells. These are enterochromaffin cells which secrete a hormone called CCK, that is cholecystokinin. So when CCK is released by the eye cells of the duodenum, the gallbladder contracts and bile is pushed out of the gallbladder into the intestine. This is the natural feedback loop that God has made for us to help us digest fat. When there is abnormalities of gallbladder function because of cholecystitis, because of acalculous cholecystitis, gallbladder dyskinesia, even with a fatty meal, the gallbladder does not empty the isotope in it. This indicates a non-functioning or a non-visualized gallbladder, which is an indication that this patient will benefit from a gallbladder surgery. Obviously, you can't do a HIDA scan in children and in pregnant women, but this is a very good test to use when your diagnosis is in doubt. But in today's day and age, the ultrasound is so good. You have thickened gallbladder wall, you have pericholecystic fluid, and your right upper quadrant pain going to the back. You are safe to do a cholecystectomy. But suppose you have gallstones in somebody who has dyspeptic symptoms. I have only a little bit of bloating. I occasionally get gas. And then incidentally, my sonography is showing gallstones. Should I remove my gallbladder? Now be very careful that you're not missing an upper GI pathology. Is this a peptic ulcer? Is it H. pylori gastritis? In an elderly person, is this a carcinoma stomach? Do stool occur blood? Look for anemia. Look for history of weight loss. Look for family history with dyspeptic symptoms. If elderly person, even think of doing upper GI endoscopy. If after ruling this, you can either do a gallbladder surgery by exclusion, or even a demanding patient, even do a HIDA scan to medico-legally convince the patient that you have an abnormal gallbladder. So the cost of HIDA scan is only about 2,500 rupees. It's cheaper than MRCP. So if you're in doubt, definitely use a HIDA scan to confirm your diagnosis. Because heaven forbid you send a patient for a lap chole and the gallbladder is removed and his symptoms continues, he's going to blame you and blame the surgeon. So this is an additional investment, but basically your antenna must be up in all patients. See, generally, Dr. Birazdar, I do about 250 gallbladder surgeries every year. And I can tell you at least 10 patients where I refuse surgery based on the clinical symptoms. When patient is asymptomatic. We'll come on to that. But let me ask Dr. Tushar Doshi this question. Say you have a patient who is completely asymptomatic, who comes to you with gallbladder stones. What is your approach? Dr. Tushar Doshi.
Yes, sir. If the patient is completely asymptomatic and has complaints of some severe gallbladder stones, then, sir, I would like to investigate him with basic biochemistry from biochemistry, sugars, lipase, amylase, and sonography if required. And if he has, if all his reports are normal, then I would give him some time in the sense of some lifestyle modification, reduce weight, fat-free diet, and repeat some investigations again after 6 months, and take a follow-up after the reports, whatever they suggest.
So Tushar bhai, 6 months later, sonography again shows gallstone. Abhi kya karenge?
if the patient is asymptomatic, he has no issues and his reports are normal, I would still tell not to touch, leave as it is alone.
Okay, excellent. So I deliberately brought this case ahead. So this is a 38-year-old patient who went to Dr. Tushar Doshi's clinic. He naturally, when she came to a history of gallstones, he asked for LFT, lipase, amylase, CBC, everything was normal. Patient is non-diabetic, non-hypertensive, has mild dyspeptic symptoms. So these are the questions and Dr. Tushar Doshi said, have a fat-free diet. Tushar bhai, you and I also can't remain on a fat-free diet for 6 months. It's not feasible for a 38-year-old lady to say, "Tum fat band karo." So, you know, ठीक है, तो low-fat diet is you can advise, but realistically, low-fat diet से gallstone जाने वाला नहीं. So she tells you, doctor, what is the risk that I may get complications? आप मेरे को तो बोलते हैं ऑपरेशन मत करो, but समझो मेरे को कुछ हुआ तो, then what will you advise? ये गूगल का जमाना है तुषार भाई. How would you answer her?
Then in that case, it is safe and best to remove the stones, remove the gallbladder.
Correct. So what are if you look at literature, what are the indications of doing a lap chole in asymptomatic gallstones? This is based on scientific literature, and I've quoted the references next to it. One is thick-walled gallbladder, which is where the stone size is more than 3 centimeters. When the total stones put together, if they're more than 3 centimeters, we know that 10% of them eventually will get gallbladder cancer. Okay, we don't know when they will get it. We just know that if the stone density is more than 3 centimeters, chance of getting gallbladder cancer is high. So in a 38-year-old lady, I will show her that data and let her make up her mind. I will not push her and say, "Tum gallbladder nikalo." फिर बोलेगा तुम surgeon है, सबका gallbladder निकालता है. On the other hand, if it's an 80-year-old man who has ischemic heart disease and diabetes, I said, look, risk and balance me, you are better off waiting and watching. The second is if the patient has a porcelain gallbladder. I'll show you pictures of that. When a nice calcified rim is seen on gallbladder, 30% of them get gallbladder cancer. The third group of asymptomatic patients are those who have sessile polyps more than 1 centimeter in size, or polyps that are growing or becoming multiple. And the last is patients in the gangetic belt, like I told you earlier. So remember, this is extremely important. So now I'm going to stop this and ask you some quiz now. This is for my panelists. This is a question. So I hope I clarified your doubts for asymptomatic gallstones. So asymptomatic gallstones should not be operated for the fear of them getting cancer or CBD stones or pancreatitis, unless they have more than 3 centimeter wall density, or the wall thickening is more than 3 millimeters, or they come from a geographical area which is high risk of malignancy. Dr. Monica Mahajan, this X-ray is for you, spot diagnosis. And remember this, there will be prizes given for the right answer. Prizes are sponsored by Dr. Amola Desai.
Parekh now.
So,
and this is gas under diaphragm.
You're not supposed to answer this. You know the slide. This is cheating. Usko minus point dena chahiye.
I didn't know the slide. I'm
You
a
see the
regular
slide before. So don't say any more. This is free gas and diaphragm. So now this is a more difficult one. I'll ask this to Dr. Vikrant Pawar. Plain X-ray abdomen, Dr. Vikrant Pawar. Kya dikh raha hai aapko? If somebody gets this from my side, I'll give a 5-star.
So the biliary tract is totally visible, and there is some gas in that biliary tract, gallstones, and possibility some gradient or some marks seen which can suggest gas in the gallbladder.
Yes, in the
Who answered that?
Tushar.
Who answered that?
Sir, me, Tushar Doshi.
Tushar bhai, you are right in one part that this is pneumobilia. Look at the left corner of this X-ray. You see a beautiful bile duct with air in it, and you see the right duct and left duct clearly seen.
Right, sir.
But there are no gallstones. You mentioned gallstones. So instead of a 5-star, I'm going to give you only a Cadbury Eclair.
Okay.
That also by Amola Desai and came here, not by me. So this is pneumobilia. Now this can be seen in patients who have previously had an ERCP. Because when you do an ERCP, you divide the sphincter. Because of dividing the sphincter, air will go from the duodenum into the bile duct, and this is a normal finding in this. It's called pneumobilia. Who will answer this? this will get a Cadbury's hamper, not just a 5-star. If somebody gets this, anybody can pick up?
Sir, something related to pancreas, pancreatic duct, sir?
Pancreatic duct. Anybody else? Except Amola, who has seen the slides. So this is another case of pneumobilia, which you can see again. This is bile duct, grossly dilated bile duct on the lower part. Another one. Anybody can get this? These are X-rays that we normally show. We have a regular CME in our hospital every Thursday, which currently we are doing online. So these are questions. These are X-rays that we see, which show our GP colleagues from Chembur, Kurla, Ghatkopar. So this is what is called a portal gas. You see there is gas in the porta hepatis, not in the bile duct. It's in the porta hepatis called portal gas. And this may be a sign of underlying portal pyemia. So please be very careful of this. Now last X-ray. Anybody can pick this up? I have already talked about this in my earlier case.
Porcelain gallbladder.
Fantastic. Who was that?
Pawar, Vikrant Pawar.
Pawar Sahib, you are absolutely right. This is what is called a porcelain gallbladder. You see this calcification lining the gallbladder. This is an unusual thing, but it is strongly pre-malignant. So it's called a porcelain gallbladder. It's an immediate indication of doing a preventive gallbladder surgery to prevent the patient from getting a gallbladder cancer. This is extremely important. Amola, how much time do you want me to continue? Dr. Padde, it's 10:55. You want to leave 10 minutes for questions? Or?
Why don't we perform cholecystomy?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Birazdar.
Why don't we perform cholecystomy to remove the stones?
Yeah. See, the question he is asking is quite relevant, and many people ask me this question: why not only remove the stones? Why remove the gallbladder? So the reason for this is gallbladder stones happen as a consequence of a poorly functioning or a non-functioning gallbladder. So removal of stones only is never going to work, because one, the gallbladder that you leave behind will not contribute anything to the digestion absorption because the poorly functioning gallbladder. The second is all the pathology lies within the mucosa of the gallbladder. So again, there will be infection. Again, there will be gallstone formation. So whether in all these years we were doing open cholecystectomy or now we do lap choles, it's always removal of gallbladder, which is the only option. Now, many times I get asked this question, Dr. Bhaiya, what will happen to my digestion? Can I get pregnant? Can I breastfeed? So I tell them that if you remove a symptomatic indicated gallbladder, you will have no further problems. If I remove your gallbladder for dyspeptic symptoms, if I remove your gallbladder only for gallbladder polyps, or I remove your gallbladder for asymptomatic gallstones, you may get dyspeptic symptoms in future. But if you have had cholecystitis, very likely you have a non-functioning or poorly functioning gallbladder, and I can guarantee that you will have no symptoms. We usually discharge a simple gallbladder the same day night. We operate in the morning, discharge the same night, at the most in 24 hours. And they usually can go to work in 4 days, and they can be on full diet within 10 days, including alcohol, smoking, non-veg, what have you. It has no consequence to long-term digestion absorption, pregnancy, childbearing, breastfeeding, no issues on this. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Birazdar. So some unusual, yeah. Any other questions from anyone in the audience or from
That's what I want to tell everybody. Anybody has questions, please post them in the chat box, so we can come up with those. We can have Roy answer them in the end.
Or any question that Roy can't answer, Dr. Amola Desai will answer. Anyhow, just tell you something new that is happening in gallbladder. This is something that we did in 2009. This is a concept called NOTES, meaning natural orifice transluminal endoscopic surgery. What you can see me doing here is, no, I haven't become a gynecologist, but I'm standing between the patient's legs and I put my laparoscopic cannula into the patient's vagina. And through the vagina, we insert a gastroscope and we opened the pouch of Douglas and did this patient's cholecystectomy. So from 2009 to 2012, we were doing these notes, gallbladder surgery, appendicectomies, omental biopsies, but gradually this has gone out of favor because it doesn't really give much benefit to the patient. The big advantage that this girl was a model and she didn't want any scar on the abdomen. So then we used to do this kind. The second thing that's happening is what is called a narrow band imaging. So when you do a diagnostic laparoscopy, we normally use white light or xenon light. We now have newer forms of laparoscopes which give blue light or monochromatic blue light, which helps to pick up early gallbladder cancer and dyspepsia. This concept is called narrow band imaging, which we have begun to use for the last 2 years in our center. The last thing that is coming in is called confocal imaging, mainly used by the endoscopists, but also coming into laparoscopic surgery. What you do in this is endoscopically or laparoscopically, you go very close to the mucosa, and you can actually see a microscopic image of the mucosa. On table, you can diagnose malignancy or dysplasia. This is called confocal microscopy, which is coming in. So soon, a laparoscopic surgeon will do ultrasound. So he's got to take over from the radiologist. He's got to know a little bit of pathology because he's going to do confocal microscopy. So the blurring of, previously there was medical gastroenterologist, surgical gastroenterologist. Gradually this Chinese wall is going away and this is merging into GI specialties. So this is how we do it. This is a laparoscopy that I am doing. This is in 2009 and we do a lot more of this. We put a trocar through the umbilicus and then insert a special endoscope into the peritoneum to do this. And this is the kind of pictures that you'll get. I don't want to go into too many details. A lot of new stuff is happening in robotic surgery. Situation where there are carts which you keep inside the OT and the robot is going to do the surgery. Like this is me doing a robotic practice when I'm actually sitting outside the OT working on the robot and the robot is operating inside the OT. And this is a picture of the robotic, this was a esophagectomy that we had done. But believe me, so far, the robot has very little data to support it. If you ask me, does the robot benefit the patient? And I'll be honest and tell you, there is no clinical benefit of robotic surgery to the patient, except in one operation, that is robot prostatectomy. For CA prostate, robotic surgery has better results than laparoscopic surgery. In no other operation, robotic surgery is beneficial except to the surgeon. Why to the surgeon? Because it doesn't have any strain. There is no strain of operating on the patient. There is also obviously economic benefit to the hospital for the higher charges that you get. But what really interests me is in future, you may have an operating theater with nobody inside it except the patient. You may have a robot doing the surgery. The surgeon like me is sitting outside the robotic console. On one eye is watching CNBC to see the Sensex Utar Chadhav. I can be sipping a cup of coffee sitting outside and the robot is operating and doing a complex surgery for me. There is a robotic anesthetist. So unlike Amola, she will not fight with the surgeon. She will come on time and induce the patient on time. There will be no problem. There will be no human being inside the OT except the patient. Yes, possibly. Think even beyond. It may be a situation where as your broadband becomes faster, our transmission becomes faster, you can have Amola sitting in Kandivali and operating on a patient in Chembur. That worries me because broadband technology will allow you to have a robot in Zen Hospital controlled by a surgeon in Kandivali. So this is where the future is going. Maybe you can work in Gadchiroli with Prakash Amte in a Naxal infested area. You don't need to go there. Already what he does is, he does endoscopies there, relays the pictures to us and we advise him on the phone. So imagine where technology is taking us in all this. But so far, ladies and gentlemen, clearly as I show you in this picture, this is a picture of Barack Obama bowing to Rajnikant. Laparoscopic surgery is here to stay. So for the routine things that we see, 99%, sure, robotics will come, confocal microscopy will come, notes will come, but basic, I think clearly we do a lot of our malignancies now laparoscopically. Whether gallbladder cancer, rectal cancer, colonic cancer, stomach cancer, 80% of oncology in our hospital is done laparoscopically. So I'll end this here. Should we take questions, Amola, or you want me to do one more case?
We have time
Okay,
for, but if you are in a hurry, we can go to the questions.
One more case? Okay. I'm not in a hurry at all, Amola. I have all the time in the world. So I'll take one more case. I thought I had troubled your panelists enough. And Dr. Monica is smiling, so I'm going to ask this question to her only. Dr. Monica Mahajan. 40-year-old male comes with frequent episodes of biliary colic for the last 1 month. He has right upper quadrant pain going to the back. Upper GI endoscopy is normal. Ultrasound is normal. Now what happens? He has no gallstones, but biliary colic, right? Upper quadrant pain going to the back. How are you going to manage this patient?
Cervical sonography.
So
EUS.
picture is like biliary colic, but ultrasound is showing no gallstone. And you know the ultrasound guy is a good ultrasoundist, like the pain.
Endoscopic ultrasound. Sir.
So as mentioned, who said that?
Sir, hi.
Okay. So before we do that, we would want to do the patient's LFTs. We want to do his count. We want to do his amylase lipase. Because remember, every right upper quadrant pain going to the back may not be a gallstone disease. If his LFT is abnormal, amylase lipase are abnormal, likely this is pancreatitis or cholecystitis. Remember, examine the patient after taking off his shirt or dress. This may be a simple herpes zoster. I have seen a patient coming to me for a second opinion who had a herpes zoster and a similar kind of thing where right upper quadrant severe pain, antibiotic given, NSAIDs given, Buscopan given, no efficacy. So if I ask you how accurate is ultrasound for diagnosis of gallstone disease, it is very accurate. I would never do an endoscopic ultrasound to diagnose gallstones. What is the accuracy of CT scan? Very poor, because radiolucent gallstones are not picked up. Maybe this is one indication of doing a HIDA scan. Remember, gallbladder sludge is better picked up on an MRCP than a CT. Endoscopic ultrasound is something that we do in Zen very regularly, Dr. Pawar, but it needs a general anesthesia. It gives you excellent imaging of the biliary tract as well as the gallstones, particularly for patients who have sludge in the gallbladder. Where the MRCP scores above this is that it doesn't require sedation or GA, and it picks up the anatomical abnormalities like annular pancreas. So when we do endoscopic ultrasound, Dr. Pawar, what is the role of endoscopic ultrasound in practice? What do you think is the right answer? So for the, you are muted, Dr. Pawar. You are on mute.
With MRCP available now, the role of endoscopic ultrasound is very limited. I cannot comment on the
Excellent. You
specialties.
are absolutely right. In our hospital, we have CT, MRCP, and endoscopic ultrasound, but we will do a MRCP in 90% of patients. The reason of doing an endoscopic ultrasound is in patients who are undergoing a ERCP. So ERCP is never a diagnostic test. Remember, ERCP has a 1 to 2% incidence of pancreatitis, which can have a significant morbidity and may also be life-threatening. So if you diagnose gallstones, you diagnose a CBD stone, you diagnose obstructive jaundice, then you do an ERCP. If you are in doubt, you do a MRCP or a US, but US is invasive, requires a sedation. So I do USs as a precursor to a borderline indication for ERCP, or more importantly, in every pancreatic cancer to determine whether the pancreatic cancer is resectable. Is it involving the SMV? Is it involving the portal vein? Are there big nodes in connection with it? That is the time I'll do an endoscopic ultrasound. I will also do an endoscopic ultrasound before I operate on cancer esophagus to look at mediastinal nodes, to do a EUS guided FNSC of the mediastinal nodes to see if they are positive. Our chest physician does endobronchial ultrasound to pick up mediastinal nodes and to look for malignancy. So these are the various indications of. Another question I get asked is the role of ESWL, and are there any drugs that we can use for gallstones? Dr. Pawar. Can you unmute yourself, Dr. Pawar?
Ursodeoxycholic acid in the dose of 20 milligram per kg body weight over a period of 6 months helps in limiting the size of the gallstones. It may not totally cure, but at least it will restrict the size of the gallstones till you are observing the patient.
What about ESWL, Dr. Pawar?
That is lithotripsy for gallstones?
Yes.
I don't think it has any role.
You're absolutely right. It's useless. You should never do it because, in fact, the ESWL will break a larger stone into smaller stones, and the chance of it coming into the bile duct increases because it will pass through the cystic duct. The second drug that I get asked is Udiliv or UDCA or ursodeoxycholic acid, which is a naturally found bile acid in the body. Now, this is commonly used by MD medicine people, and they tell the patient that you can avoid surgery by using UDCA. This is what I call a TTP drug, total time pass. There is no value in using these drugs. There is no evidence that UDCA dissolves gallstones, restricts the size of gallstones, prevents surgery. It benefits the pharma company manufacturing it because the patient will take 300 or 450 milligram BID for 6 months. Acha paisa milega. But if the patient is going to have problems, he's going to have problems. So if you have a symptomatic gallstone, please do not use any drugs for dissolving it or preventing increase in size. And remember the TTP, I told you this first. So this is a good thing to use.
Sir,
In fact, sometimes we do use these placebos, but this is one such placebo. Yes, somebody
sir,
asked you a question.
In fact, in your slide, you had initially mentioned that one of the reasons for some gallbladder problems was UDCA drugs. So how does that drug cause that problem, sir?
Because it gives a false sense of security to the patient that he's going to avoid surgery and he comes with complications. Too often I have seen this, that you get sludge coming into the bile duct and causing a gallstone pancreas. I'm actually not worried about gallstones. I'm worried about the consequence of gallstones with stones slipping into the bile duct, causing either obstructive jaundice and cholangitis, or even worse, causing gallstone pancreatitis. So this is something I always counsel a patient who has symptomatic gallstones and doesn't want surgery. I said, that's fine. If I'm telling you to get operated, but if you're lucky, you will not have it for 10 years. And then you say that Roy Patankar advised me unnecessary surgery. Or you may get gallstone pancreatitis and come into my ICU next week. And I'll have to do a ERCP, put you in ICU, remove the stone, and then do a lap chole later. So I always make sure that such a patient who is wavering, I give them both these options, saying, I can't predict if you will get complications. I can tell you that 8 to 10% of patients will get complications. Whether you are in that 8% or 92%, I don't know. And then that's a call that you have to take. But the other thing, I tell them to go on to this ACG, American College of Gastroenterology site. Many intelligent patients will read it themselves, reading the complications will come back to you. Any other questions? It's 11:10, Amola. So I think it's about...
So Roy, I now call Dr. Jay Kotecha. Are you there, Jay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm there.
Yeah. So Jay, can you do the questionnaire?
Hello, sir.
So Jay has been busy in morning, huh? Sunday morning work.
No. It's a very informative lecture, sir. It's a pleasure to attend your lecture, sir.
Thank you, Jay.
So coming on to the questions, like one of the doctors has asked, in an asymptomatic gallbladder, does small stones can go retrograde and obstruct bile duct or common bile duct?
Definitely they can, Jay. And Jay is obviously a therapeutic endoscopist who does a lot of ERCPs. He must be seeing a lot of these patients coming with obstructive jaundice and pancreatitis. But if you look clearly at the evidence, even patients with multiple small gallstones who have no symptoms, there is no justification to do a prophylactic cholecystectomy. I myself do it sometimes. Like, for example, people going to the Gulf. When they get a pre-employment checkup and the patient, the company says you're not fit to undergo surgery, join job until surgery. Or many times patients in the merchant navy, the company doctor will tell you you are unfit because if on board the ship, if you get cholecystitis, the company has to airlift him to the nearest port. So in these patients, I have also done prophylactic lap choles for these asymptomatic stones, but the evidence is clear that asymptomatic gallstones should not be operated even in fit grade 1 ASA patients.
Very true, sir.
There is another question from Dr. Nilesh Sheth also about the same thing, about stones going retrograde, which you avoid. Another question that I'm getting is from Dr. Shalu Bhutani. Post cholecystectomy, if a patient can't eat a full meal at a time without discomfort, how to treat? So Dr. Shalu Bhutani, I think what we need to do is to evaluate the cause of this. Was this prior to surgery also? So it was a bad indication for doing a lap chole. But if you get this situation of full meal, this is obviously a non-ulcer dyspepsia or maybe even a gastroparesis. explore the history of diabetes, do a upper GI endoscopy, do a stool occult blood, look at the LFTs, ask them for history of steatorrhea. If necessary, if nothing else comes in this and the patient complains of upper abdominal disc, the commonly used drug is combination of PPI with domperidone. You can also use levosulpiride in patients who are younger. I don't use levosulpiride in elderly patients for fear of Parkinson's-like side effects. But domperidone is excellent in this. And still, if you want to be very scientific, then you can do a gastric isotope study, gastric emptying study. And this is done in two parts for liquid emptying and solid emptying. The cost is about 2,500 rupees, and then you can scientifically treat these patients. Another question from Dr. Jay Katecha is, in post-mild gallstone pancreatitis, is cholecystectomy indicated even in the absence of gallbladder stones? So Jay, I think you're very right that every patient undergoing gallstone pancreatitis, but how do you call it gallstone pancreatitis unless you see gallstones? So to call it gallstone pancreatitis, either your ERCP, you must extract the stone, or you must see stone in the gallbladder. Suppose you have a CBD stone, which you remove, and then the ultrasound doesn't show gallstones. I would still remove the gallbladder because these are primary gallbladder stones which are slipped in the common bile duct. It's a diseased gallbladder. As a prophylaxis, worth removing it. If you want to be even more scientific, do a HIDA scan and then do it. Jay, any more questions that you want to ask?
Roy, there's one question from Dr. Subhash Gajaria. Gallbladder surgery, avoid what? I did not actually understand. What does he?
I don't understand that question. Avoid means, are we avoiding CBD injuries or avoiding surgery? I don't understand the nature of the question. Maybe it's online.
After gallbladder surgery, what are the things you need to avoid?
Nothing. At the end, in a symptomatic gallbladder, if it's a pathologically diseased gallbladder, removal of gallbladder will not lead to change in your lifestyle. You can pretty much eat everything. Question from Akil Contractor is, what are the chances of cancer? Should all patients with gallstones need cholecystectomy? Dr. Contractor, I answered this question in one of my slides, that if your stone density is more than 3 centimeters, if there is significant wall thickening, if you come from an area which is very high in gallbladder cancer, or your family history of gallbladder cancer, then it's indication for surgery.
When do you do stenting for common bile duct? He's asked. Dr. Akil Contractor.
I think Jay can answer this question better. Jay, you want to answer that or should I?
So I can answer. Whenever there is blockage in the common bile duct, we have altered LFTs showing signs of obstruction or any imaging showing signs of gallstone or blockage.
Excellent. So anything that causes any obstructive jaundice, any stone in the bile duct with cholangitis, or any gallstone pancreatitis with abnormalities of the LFT. If your gallstone pancreatitis has normal LFT, I would not do ERCP. But in every indication, ERCP is in. Remember, as Jay said, ERCP is a therapeutic option. You don't do a diagnostic ERCP. Either, as he said, the imaging must show a CBD stone, or your LFTs must be strongly suspicious of a CBD stone, in which case, at the most, you may do a EUS followed by ERCP.
Dr. Mitesh Vora would like to know, what is the post-cholecystectomy complication?
I think one is to do with complications during surgery, and the commonest problems are injuries to the common bile duct leading to strictures, bile leaks, or collection in the gallbladder fossa. This is a purely surgical topic, and this is something that we should avoid during surgery by taking adequate care.
Dr. Shailesh wants to know, what is white jaundice?
This is something that the Ayurvedic doctors talk about, कि सफेद पीलिया और पीला पीलिया. मेरे को तो समझता नहीं है. मेरे लिए सब पीला है. And discoloration, I always tell jaundice means yellow sclera. There has to be dark urine. There has to be abnormal LFTs. So many people in Ayurvedic medicine, they take your nadi pariksha and say that तुमको सफेद पीलिया हो गया है. Means your liver is not functioning well. But unfortunately, I don't understand this complex science. I am very simple man. I look at LFTs, I look at ultrasound, I look at eye of the patient, and can only diagnose yellow pilia. I can't diagnose safed pilia. So I can't answer that question. The question from Dr. Subhash Gajaria saying, what drugs to avoid in gallbladder stones? I think that's a very good question. You should avoid drugs like ceftriaxone. I mentioned this earlier. This is a commonly used cephalosporin, which is known to cause gallbladder sludging. It can cause abnormalities in LFTs. Another drug to avoid in patients with liver disease is coamoxiclav or Augmentin, because that is known to cause medical cholestasis. Avoid the use of estrogens, anabolic steroids, metformin in some patients. Patients cirrhotic shouldn't take metformin. So these are common drugs that are often used, and a lot of drug interactions need to be thought about in this.
Sir, you said one antihypertensives also can cause. Can you please tell some?
Alpha methyl dopa. It's an older one which only the gynecologists currently use for PIH, alpha methyl dopa. But many hormones, estrogens, anabolic steroids also should ideally be avoided.
Dr. Nilesh Shet wants to know treatment of acute cholecystitis pain. I think if you can just revise
So
it.
for any infection, the first thing you look at is source control. The gallbladder is a cause of it, remove the gallbladder. But prior to that, give adequate antibiotics. And I think earlier on, I think Dr. Tushar Doshi had mentioned co-amoxiclav or cefuroxime or quinolones as antibiotics. You may use a combination of non-steroidals with dicyclomine for the spasmodic pain. Be careful of using non-steroidals in elderly people or where you don't have a creatinine or a history of asthma, because that's avoidable. In those cases, you can use something like nefopam, or you can use tramadol, or you can use high-dose paracetamol.
Dr. Mitesh Vora wants to know, if there is no ultrasound available, how will you differentiate clinically gallstones from pancreatic stone?
Wow. So pancreatic stones are usually seen with chronic pancreatitis. ये तो मेरा परीक्षा ले रहा है, definitely. ये practice का question नहीं है, मेरा परीक्षा है. So pancreatitis stones are seen with chronic pancreatitis, which is always a long history. There will usually be history upwards of 6 months. There will be central abdominal pain radiating to the back as opposed to right upper quadrant pain radiating to the back. Thirdly, there's likely to be weight loss. Fourthly, the patient may have steatorrhea or at least fatty, foul-smelling stools. And there may be history of alcohol, which is the common cause of chronic pancreatitis. On the other hand, gallbladder pain is right upper quadrant going to the back. Remember, in gallbladder, you can get epigastric pain. And I'm sure Jay would like to hear this. Is epigastric pain going to the back can also be seen in CVD stones and cholangitis. But that's acute pain. It is much more severe than, it's often associated with tachycardia and fever. So clinically, you can always think in your mind, is this pancreatic stone versus gallbladder stone? See, pancreatic stones are not seen in acute pancreatitis, always in chronic pancreatitis.
Even an X-ray, a simple X-ray abdomen will show stones.
Yeah, but X-ray abdomen picks up pancreatic stones only in 30 to 40% of patients. Many times you'll see radiolucent stones. And he's saying no ultrasound also available. So X-ray bhi nahi milne wala hai.
Dr.
So
Hema,
all the prizes announced for the X-rays will be personally sponsored, not by KMA, but by a friend, Amola Parikh. And I'm hoping she'll send me a...
But first of all, you are saying no X-ray, no sonography. And you want me to sponsor their prizes?
That is your husband's clinic, not your clinic. Your anesthetist. Gallbladder nikalne se tumhara fayda hai. मैंने इतना indication बोला है. I should also say that anesthesia should only be given by Amola Parikh.
Yes, true. Okay, Dr. Hema Dave would like to, has mentioned, there are no jaundice awareness program at government level or health sector level. So is there anything that can be done?
I think I'll stand for election to see if I can change something in the next government. But I don't think I have much clout in the current government, at least. But there is currently awareness going on about hepatitis B. That is happening. It's part of the universal vaccination program. So that is very much there. But white jaundice is something that allopathic medicine doesn't believe in. So I don't think we should go down that road.
Roy, is there anything about gallbladder that you don't know?
How much to charge? And why I didn't settle in Kandivali rather than settling in Chembur? I would have been driving a Mercedes by now.
I mean, you can answer each question without X-ray, with X-ray, with sono, everything. Like you know the gallbladder in and out, yeah.
It doesn't mean that you don't have to sponsor the gifts by saying that.
Fantastic, Roy. You've really clarified all our doubts about gallbladder. You made us much more aware about the symptoms, signs, everything about the gallbladder. Thank you so much for a very informative lecture. And I think if there are no more questions,
I want to specifically thank the 4 panelists, Dr. Birazdar, Dr. Pawar, Dr. Doshi, and Dr. Mahajan, who really participated well. And this is a good way of bringing out the nuances of any condition, rather than some speaker coming giving a boring lecture where everybody is watching IPL with the match with the with the phone on. And thank you, of course, to KMA, Dr. Padde, and Dr. Amola Parikh, my friend, for suffering me on a Sunday morning.
Suffering, I think it was a great pleasure to have you with us. We are really lucky that you had the time to enlighten us about the gallbladder. Roy, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Dr. Padde, also. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I-
And I think
can
this
I
idea
ask one-
about an informative session was a good idea, rather than
Very
having
good.
a lecture and everybody just listening to it. This really brought out our shortcomings, the many misconceptions that that many general practitioners might be having. So all those have been cleared, and I think Dr. Akhil Contractor
Yeah.
would like to ask a question. Just a last question, Roy.
Sure.
No, no,
Dr. Akhil
Dr.
Contractor, I've unmuted you.
Yeah, Dr. Patankar, can you listen to me?
Sure. Yes, Dr. Contractor. I'm listening to you, sir.
Okay, now, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm working for IMA Mumbai West. I'm the past president and the trustee. And we have
Yes.
regular CME programs where our attendance is more than 500. So I would like
Fantastic.
to get one talk from you in December. If it is possible,
My pleasure, sir.
somebody will contact you.
Certainly.
Because
Thank
it
you,
was
Dr.
a-
Contractor.
Excellent talk, and I think this awareness and your knowledge should be given to many, many more doctors.
Thank you, Dr. Contractor. My pleasure.
Thank you.
And Roy, we have recorded this. Do we have your permission to send the link in our association?
Only if I get a free lunch from you.
Definite. Anytime.
Done. Always, Amola. No problem. Most welcome.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for today.
Everybody. Thank you for being part of this
My
webinar.
pleasure. My pleasure. Bye.
Thank you.